A quick word on this week's sponsor, Outskill. In 2025, 51% of companies are already using AI. Microsoft, Amazon, and Google have laid off thousands because of it. 40% of people fear AI will take their job this year. It sounds scary, but companies are also hiring people who understand AI and use and build AI tools. If you run a business, freelance, or are building something of your own, AI is leverage. So if you want to stay ahead, hire better, build faster, start learning AI today with Outskill, the world's first AI-focused education platform, which is backed by renowned AI investors and AI founders. I highly recommend joining their 2-day AI training, which takes you from beginner to advanced AI professional in just 16 hours. It's valued at $895, but I've partnered with Outskill to provide 1,000 free places. This 2-day online program offers 16 hours of live AI training, spread across 2 days. The training is happening this weekend on Saturday 14th and Sunday 15th of June, 11 AM to 7 PM. My audience can attend it completely free. You'll gain in-depth knowledge on a wide range of topics including AI tools and prompt engineering. This training is for everyone. Professionals from tech and non-tech sectors like sales, marketing, HR operations, and even business owners and freelancers have attended and enjoyed, and over 4 million people from 40 different countries have already participated. If you want to learn and get ahead, click the link in the description or follow the QR code on screen to book your slot today. And there is an introduction call and first session for the 2-day training happening on Friday at 10 AM Eastern Standard Time. Thanks again to Outskill for sponsoring this video. 19th of October 2023. Less than 2 weeks since the devastating Hamas attack on Israel, the Middle East is at a boiling point. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer USS Carney has been dispatched to the Red Sea. Just 2 days previously, amongst a wider devastating campaign of airstrikes by Israel in the Gaza Strip, what is later assessed to be a stray Hamas rocket strikes the Al-Ali Arab hospital in Gaza, killing and wounding hundreds of civilians. Much of the Islamic world is outraged by what they believe to be an Israeli airstrike. The Houthi movement, controlling much of Yemen, joins the condemnation, lambasting the incident as genocide with American Western cover. USS Carney's powerful SPY-1D radars detect several new contacts rising from western Yemen. The 3 cruise missiles turn north, up the Red Sea towards Israel. American forces are in the region to prevent the war from escalating out of control. As US President Joe Biden warned after the 7th of October, to any country, any organisation, anyone thinking of taking advantage of this situation, I have one word: don't. Splitting the night, SM-2 surface-to-air missiles erupt from the USS Carney's vertical launch silos. Her sailors scramble from their bunks and rush to their battle stations. The destroyer guides her standard missiles onto the targets, splashing all 3. Steadily, more small tracks appear on their screens, this time kamikaze drones. Carney obliterates 4 of the UAVs with high explosive rounds from her 5-inch gun. Over the next few hours, another 10 are splashed by yet more SM-2s. The United States Navy has successfully stopped the attack, but little do the sailors of the USS Carney know, it is a taste of things to come. This video is somewhat different from our regular format. What follows is a time-lapse of every recorded Houthi incident in the Red Sea from November 2023 to the 31st of December 2024. All incidents will be shown, but only key incidents will be specifically narrated. Exact locations of the military assets involved are classified, and so these are approximations of those locations. No classified material has been used in the production of this video. After Carney's interception of their first attack, the Houthis continue to launch drones, cruise missiles, and even a ballistic missile at Israel, all of which either miss or are shot down by Israeli defense forces. They also shoot down a US MQ-9 Reaper drone on the 8th of November. Seeking an indirect approach, Houthi leadership, in a 14th of November statement, announces that their forces will attack Israeli shipping in the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The next day, USS Thomas Hudner, patrolling in the Red Sea, detects a lone kamikaze drone approaching the international sea lane, though not clearly targeting any particular vessel. Presenting a clear threat to international shipping, Thomas Hudner destroys the UAV with an SM-2. For the next few days, all is quiet in the Red Sea. MV Galaxy Leader and her 25-man crew entered the Red Sea on the 16th, and have been steadily ploughing their way south since. Galaxy Leader is a vehicle carrier. She flies the flag of the Bahamas, and is owned by Galaxy Maritime Limited, a shipping company registered in the Isle of Man. but is operating on behalf of a Japanese company. She has no private security team aboard, and the vessel switches off its AIS positioning system as a precaution. At 11 AM on the 19th of November, an Mi-171 helicopter approaches Galaxy Leader and touches down on her superstructure. 8 black-clad Houthi militants spring from the helicopter and push up towards the vessel's bridge. AK-103 assault rifles in hand, they rapidly take control of the bridge and the ship's crew. More Houthi militants arrive aboard several fast attack craft to secure the ship, and sail the vessel to Houthi territory. Her crew of 17 Filipinos, 3 Ukrainians, 2 Bulgarians, 2 Mexicans, and 1 Romanian are still being held captive by the Houthis at the time of writing. Galaxy Leader's hijacking on the high seas is widely condemned, especially since the vessel was not heading to or from Israel, and had no Israeli personnel aboard. The Houthis defend their actions, arguing Galaxy Maritime was founded and owned by an Israeli businessman, therefore was a legitimate target. In the following days, Houthi forces begin launching more drones and missiles at international shipping. US and allied forces in the Red Sea move to defend the merchant ships. Iran's foreign ministry denies involvement, claiming that resistance groups in the region act independently and spontaneously based on their interests and that of their people. Iran's statement is partly true. The Houthi movement, while aligned with Iran and a member of its alliance of proxy groups, the so-called Axis of Resistance, does maintain a degree of autonomy from Tehran, viewing itself as a partner rather than a puppet. It is not known if the Ayatollah encouraged the Houthis to attack the international shipping lanes, but to do so was entirely in their interests. The Houthis have been in a difficult spot in Yemen, as their economy and quality of life has declined. The majority of Yemen's population living under the Houthis grow increasingly discontented. However, the Israel-Gaza conflict offers the Houthis a golden opportunity. By ostensibly attacking Israel through the disruption of merchant shipping, they claim to be champions of the Palestinian cause. This has won them overwhelming domestic support with the fervently pro-Palestine Yemeni public, drowning out most opposition voices and distracting the people from their worsening situation. Furthermore, by furthering Iran's overarching objectives of applying pressure on Israel and the United States, and by being able to challenge the United States directly, the Houthis can fulfill their aspiration to be a respected senior partner in the Axis of Resistance, similar to Hezbollah. On the 18th of December, as it becomes increasingly apparent that the Houthis are targeting ships that have nothing to do with Israel, the US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin announces the establishment of Operation Prosperity Guardian. He condemns Houthi actions, stating they threaten the free flow of commerce, endanger innocent mariners, and violate international law. Around 20 nations were initially earmarked to participate in Prosperity Guardian, though only the United Kingdom, Greece, and Denmark offered ships. France agreed that its warships in the region would cooperate with US forces, but would remain under national command. Around this time, the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower and her carrier strike group arrived from the Persian Gulf to bolster US forces in the area. At 6:30 AM on the 31st of December 2023, the container ship Maersk Hangzhou, owned by Danish shipping giant Maersk and flying the flag of Singapore, reports that she is being approached by 4 armed skiffs. The Houthi fast attack craft open up with machine gun fire, closing within 20 meters of the ship, before being driven back by fire from the Maersk Hangzhou's private security team. An MH-60 Romeo Seahawk, flying from the destroyer USS Gravely, is the first help to arrive. They hail the Houthi vessels, warning them to withdraw, but the Houthis reply with ineffective heavy machine gun fire. The Navy helicopter is cleared hot and ripples off 4 Hellfire missiles, obliterating 3 of the vessels and killing 10 Houthi fighters. The 4th survives and flees back to shore. This marks the first Houthi militants killed by US forces. The rate of attack slows while the Houthis prepare a sophisticated retaliatory strike. On the evening of the 9th of January 2024, 18 kamikaze drones are launched towards the Red Sea and the Dwight D. Eisenhower's strike group. Close behind are 2 anti-ship missiles, likely Iranian derivatives of the Chinese C-802. Finally, a single anti-ship ballistic missile tears skyward to reach its apogee, and descends down towards the coalition warships. Eisenhower's Standing Combat Air Patrol of Fa-18 Super Hornets engages the drones and anti-ship missiles with AIM-120 AMRAAMs and AIM-9X Sidewinders. Along with the destroyers USS Laboon, Gravely and Mason, they splash both of the C-802s and 11 of the kamikaze UAVs. One of the Arleigh Burkes tracks the anti-ship ballistic missile as it enters its terminal phase, and engages with missiles of their own, likely the new SM-6, and handily intercepts the ASBM. The watch aboard the bridge of HMS Diamond recall, when US Navy units began engaging, the sky lit up with orange sparks like fireworks. The Royal Navy Air Warfare Destroyer tracks the remaining drones. She takes down 6 of the low-flying attackers with her Sea Viper surface-to-air missiles. She tracks the last as it crosses towards a merchant ship, and guns it down with her 30mm cannon, aimed manually from the operations room. On the 10th of January, the United Nations Security Council adopts Resolution 2722, condemning the Houthi attacks on shipping. UK Defence Secretary Grant Shapps warns, "We must be clear with the Houthis that this has to stop, and that is my simple message to them today, and watch this space." While visiting Bahrain, the home of US Central Command's naval headquarters, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken states in a press conference, "We've been clear with more than 20 other countries that if this continues as it did yesterday, there will be consequences." The consequences arrive at 2:30 AM local time, the 11th of January 2024. Destroyers of the Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group and an Ohio-class guided missile submarine, the USS Florida, launch 80 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles at targets across Houthi-controlled Yemen. Eisenhower's Super Hornets contribute their JDAMs to the attack, supported by EA-18G Growler jammer aircraft to suppress Houthi air defense radars and sounds. The air attack is joined by US Air Force strike aircraft flying from Jordan, and 4 Royal Air Force Typhoons flying all the way from RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus. The British aircraft strike 2 airfields used to launch UAVs, with Paveway 4 bombs. US forces hit a total of 60 targets, mainly weapons storage, headquarters and launch sites across 16 locations. This is the beginning of a separate offensive operation named Poseidon Archer. Later that day, while boarding a dhow off the coast of Somalia to interdict Iranian-supplied missile parts, 2 US Navy SEALs fall overboard and are lost at sea. US forces will search for 10 days before declaring Special Warfare Operator First Class Christopher Chambers and Special Warfare Operator Second Class Nathan Ingram deceased. The vessel they boarded was found to be carrying weapon components from Iran. With long-standing arms embargoes making the shipment of weapons to the Houthi forces in Yemen difficult, Iran has adopted a different approach to help arm its partner. Instead of shipping complex weapon systems such as missiles and UAVs wholesale, they ship parts and components, which the Houthis then assemble domestically. Hence, Houthi weapons, such as the Wa'id-2, are actually just locally assembled Iranian Shahed 136 UAVs, and the Asef anti-ship ballistic missile is an anti-ship variant of the Iranian Fateh 110 ballistic missile, produced using parts smuggled from Iran. Iran's officials have been quite open about this cooperation, and Iran's defense minister even warned against Operation Prosperity Guardian, claiming, "No one can make a move in a region where we have predominance," in an obvious reference to the Houthis' anti-access and area denial capabilities in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. With Houthi forces refusing to back down, the US and Britain continue Operation Poseidon Archer. Super Hornets from Eisenhower strike underground weapons storage sites, radars and air defense systems with JDAMs, bunker-busting bombs and HARM missiles. Again flying all the way from Cyprus, British Typhoons join in with their Paveway 4s. Tomahawks from the cruiser USS Philippine Sea, destroyers USS Mason and USS Gravely, as well as the USS Florida, round off the attack. The British warships in the area lack a cruise missile capability and specialise in air defence cover of coalition assets. On the 24th of January, American container ships Maersk Detroit and Maersk Chesapeake are attacked with 2 anti-ship ballistic missiles. The USS Gravely, escorting the 2 US-flagged vessels, intervenes. Using her Aegis combat system in ballistic missile defence mode, she splashes both incoming weapons with SM-6 interceptors. It's the first confirmed use of the formidable surface-to-air missile. However, a Houthi anti-ship cruise missile slips through her defences and homes in on the ships. Just 100 metres from one of the container ships, it's shredded by the 20mm depleted uranium shells of Gravely's Phalanx close-in weapon system. The Houthis strike again on the 26th of January. Tanker Marlin Luanda, carrying over 80,000 tonnes of highly flammable oil naphtha, is struck by an anti-ship ballistic missile, sparking a major fire in her cargo hold. Her crew bravely battle the growing blaze until help arrives. Indian Navy destroyer INS Visakhapatnam is the first ship on the scene. The Indian Navy deployed her to the region after an Iranian drone attack on a ship in the Indian Exclusive Economic Zone. The destroyer deploys a team of 10 of her sailors to help contain the inferno. The Indian Navy sailors lead with their better firefighting equipment and help the Marlin Luanda's crew attack and defeat the fire. They also patch a hull breach caused by the missile impact. French air defense frigate FS Alsace and the USS Carney arrive to assist. Houthi forces launch an additional anti-ship missile towards the USS Carney. The American destroyer tracks the incoming weapon and salvos her interceptors, neutralizing the threat. INS Visakhapatnam is a very capable warship, with a modern sensor suite and a robust area air defense armament in her Israeli-designed Barak 8 SAMs. Yet she never engages any Houthi weapons. As part of Operation Sandkalp, the Indian Navy operates a dozen warships in the Red Sea, foremost of which are Visakhapatnam and guided missile frigate INS Kolkata, with support from P-8 and MQ-9 Guardian surveillance aircraft, but avoids combat against the Houthis altogether. Indian warships only respond to ships struck by Houthi missiles and drones in a search and rescue capacity. Instead, the Indian government directs its maritime forces to counter Somali piracy, and Indian Marcos Special Forces rescue 2 merchant ships off the Horn of Africa. Around this time, the United States observes the first Houthi use of unmanned surface vessels. These are small craft, often fishing skiffs, packed with up to 1,500 kilograms of high explosive. While slow, and not as responsive as ballistic missiles or kamikaze drones, they are capable of inflicting severe damage on large merchant ships, and can also be used en masse, complicating the threat picture for coalition forces. In retaliation for the attack on the MV Marlin Luanda, coalition forces launched their third round of strikes. American FA-18 and EA-18G Growlers, 4 British Typhoons, and Tomahawk missiles from the USS Carney and USS Gravely strike 36 targets in 13 locations. These are primarily underground weapons storage sites targeted with bunker-busting munitions, as well as air defense sites, radars, and weapon launchers. On the 7th of February, the United States conducts a cyber attack against the Iranian ship MV Beshad. This is part of a wider retaliation for the killing of 3 American soldiers in Jordan by Iranian proxy forces. MV Beshad is a merchant vessel, believed to be used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to provide the Houthis with targeting information. The cyber attack has allegedly targeted the ship's communication systems. The effectiveness of the attack is not disclosed, but Houthi forces conduct relatively few attacks over the next week. Warships of Iran's regular navy patrol the Red Sea periodically, but are not involved in the fighting. China's People's Liberation Army Navy also maintains a force in the region, supplied by its facilities in Djibouti, but the People's Republic maintains cordial relations with Iran, and reportedly secures an agreement with the Houthis to prevent its ships from being targeted. Several European warships are deploying to the region in anticipation of a separate EU mission to protect merchant shipping. On the 18th of February, the cargo ship Ruby Mar is struck by 2 anti-ship ballistic missiles. One hit causes major damage to the ship's engine room and severe flooding of the compartment. There are no casualties, but the crew make the decision to abandon ship. Ruby Mar will drift for nearly 2 weeks before finally slipping beneath the waves on the 2nd of March. She is the first merchant ship to be sunk by the Houthis. On the 19th of February, the European Union announces the beginning of Operation Aspides, running parallel to Prosperity Guardian. It is commanded nominally by the Hellenic Navy, with tactical command given to the Italian Navy. Germany, the Netherlands and Belgium contribute further vessels, and France places their warships in the region under EU command. In retaliation for the attack on the MV Ruby Mar, US forces and UK Typhoons launched their fourth round of airstrikes as part of Poseidon Archer, hitting 18 Houthi targets. The same repertoire of underground weapon storage, UAVs, SAMs and radars are hit. This time, US surveillance assets spot an unusual target, an Mi-24 Hind. The Hind attack helicopter is observed at an airstrip, and the nearest strike aircraft, an EA-18G Growler, looses off an AGM-88 HARM anti-radar missile, guided by the GPS coordinates, and obliterates the gunship. With Operation Prosperity Guardian, Poseidon Archer, and now Operation Aspides, all running in parallel, there are now a considerable number of international military and civilian ships and aircraft in close proximity, which runs the risk of accidents or friendly fire. On the 26th of February, the newly arrived German frigate FGS Hessen, operating as part of Operation Aspides, detects a medium-level UAV and attempts to make contact with it. They receive no response and, as per their rules of engagement, salvo a pair of SM-2s at the UAV. It is not confirmed if both missiles fail or if their radar lock is broken intentionally, as the German sailors realise their target is a US MQ-9 Reaper. On the 6th of March, shortly after 11:30 am local time, bulk carrier True Confidence is contacted by Houthi forces, who order her to reverse course. She complies, but nevertheless is struck by an anti-ship ballistic missile on her superstructure, killing 3 of her sailors and injuring another 2. With the ship severely damaged, the crew launch their lifeboats, leaving the vessel to drift. These mark the first merchant mariners killed by Houthi attacks. The Iranian-backed militants are far from done. 3 days later, the Houthis launched their largest single attack to date, claiming to launch 37 kamikaze UAVs into the waterways around Yemen. Over the Gulf of Aden, French Air Force Mirages, flying combat air patrol over FS Alsace, vaporized 2 drones with Mika air-to-air missiles. Alsace claims another 2 with her Aster-15s. In the Red Sea, FA-18 Super Hornets, directed by Hawkeye AWACS aircraft and destroyers of the Eisenhower Strike Group, take down at least 18 of the drones in a melee of AMRAAM and Standard missiles. Acting in support, Royal Navy frigate HMS Lancaster catches 2 drones with her Sea Scepter surface-to-air missiles. Newly arrived Danish warship Iver Huitfeldt tracks several UAVs coming her way. An evolved Sea Sparrow missile tears from its silo, splashing the first drone. But a software error with the VLS paralyses her missile systems. Unable to launch SAMs, she engages the next drone, closing at wave-top height, with her 2 76mm guns. Half of the shells detonate prematurely, bursting concerningly close to the ship. The other half make it to their target. Iver Huitfeldt destroys 3 more drones with her guns, but she is placed under the protection of an American destroyer while her crew troubleshoot the ship's combat management system. On the 20th of March, FS Alsace's helicopter, an AS-565 Panther, intercepts a UAV and destroys it with the 7.62mm Door machine gun. The next day, Hessen's Lynx Mark 88 destroys a Houthi uncrewed surface vessel with its cabin-mounted 50 caliber M3 machine gun. Alsace is back in action on the 21st. She tracks 3 anti-ship ballistic missiles diving at her and engages. Her Aster-30 Block 0 SAMs on paper only have a limited availability to engage ballistic missiles, but her crew engage regardless, splashing all 3 incoming weapons. Using Aster-30 in the ballistic missile defense role is a feat that will be repeated by both the British and Italian navies. With the intensity of the combat, it is easy to forget that the naval and air battle in the Red Sea is just one front in a larger proxy war. Since the 7th of October attack against Israel by Hamas, skirmishes between Iranian-backed forces and Israel and the United States have only escalated. Through 2023 and 24, American forces in Syria and Iraq have found themselves under constant attack with mortars, rockets and kamikaze drones, fired by various Iranian-backed militant groups, referring to themselves as Islamic Resistance in Iraq and Syria. The US government, seeking to avoid any wider escalation, avoids retaliation until the Tower 22 strike, which kills 3 US soldiers. Nevertheless, America's retaliatory airstrikes are limited to Islamic resistance targets in Iraq and Syria, rather than Iran itself. Since the outbreak of the Gaza War, Israel and Hezbollah clash constantly in a crisis that teeters on the edge of total war. In the hours after the 7th of October, the Biden administration narrowly talks Benjamin Netanyahu out of a preemptive attack against Hezbollah. Finally, Israel and Iran themselves trade fire in April of 2024. After an Israeli airstrike on the Iranian consulate in Damascus in Syria, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Houthis launched nearly 300 kamikaze drones, cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, almost all of which are intercepted by Israel, US, Jordanian, British and French forces, including the USS Carney redeployed from the Red Sea. Despite the magnitude of the attack, the US government pressures Israel to take the win and avoid a response that could spiral into war. As a result, Israel's attack is limited to a standoff missile strike against an Iranian surface-to-air missile site near a nuclear research facility. The Red Sea is the final front of this wider proxy war, and like on every other front, the United States seeks to avoid escalation. While the US Navy is constantly conducting small strikes against drones on the ground, anti-ship missile launchers and other targets, these are preemptive self-defense strikes against targets spotted by surveillance assets. The larger rounds of strikes against Houthi forces under Poseidon Archer tend to be in reaction to notable attacks such as that on MV Marlin Luanda. American and British strikes are aimed to degrade Houthi anti-ship and air defense capabilities, rather than wipe out the Houthis' military capacity in one fell swoop, or attempt to overthrow the organization itself. As one US official states, we are specifically avoiding escalation by selecting these targets. Despite the continual attacks against drones, missile launchers, control stations, radars, weapons storage and command and control, the Houthis continue to launch their attacks. Years of fighting against the technologically sophisticated but less competent Saudi Arabian armed forces has prepared the Houthis to survive against the US aerial onslaught. Nevertheless, the strikes and intensity of the operation has likely depleted much of the Houthis' pre-war arsenal, but they are still able to produce or obtain new weapons and are still threatening the international shipping lanes, even if their capacity is degraded and the number of attacks reduces. Over 20% of global container traffic and 12% of merchant shipping generally passes through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, including 40% of all trade between Europe and Asia. Attacking this shipping route obviously has economic consequences, albeit slight. The Houthis' attacks also violate the UN Convention on the Laws of the Sea, which enshrines the freedom of navigation and the right to navigation of the sea for all nations in international law. On top of the threat of physical harm, the crisis has caused insurance premiums for shipping companies to skyrocket to wartime rates if they seek to transit their ships through the Red Sea. By May of 2024, several big names such as Maersk, BP, Evergreen, MSC and Stena Bulk have all switched to the longer and more expensive journey around the Cape of Good Hope, diverting $200 billion worth of trade. On the 12th of June, a Houthi unmanned surface vessel packed with explosives slams into the stern of Greek-owned bulk carrier MV Tutor. The blast rocks the engine room, killing one of her Filipino sailors and crippling her propulsion. In quick succession, 4 anti-ship ballistic missiles rain down around her. One strikes her deck, causing more damage. The USS Philippine Sea responds to her distress call, and her MH-60 Romeo lifts off Tutor's surviving 21-man crew. From Philippine Sea, the sailors are flown to the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. Conscious that the Filipino seafarers have been through a considerable ordeal and the loss of one of their shipmates, the Filipino-speaking community aboard the US carrier rally to help the sailors feel welcome and treat them to a buffet lunch, while the US secures their safe return to the Philippines. In stark contrast, when the Ukrainian-owned cargo ship Verbena is struck by an anti-ship missile, the Iranian warship IRIS Jamaran allegedly refuses to respond to her distress call, despite being just 8 nautical miles away. The laws of the sea and the oldest traditions of seafarers dictate that saving lives is paramount. Thankfully, for the crew of the Verbena, another merchant MV Anameta comes to her assistance. On the 22nd of June, the US Dwight D. Eisenhower departs the Red Sea, ending her grueling 9-month deployment. Ike and its air wing provided the bulk of Operation Prosperity Guardian's firepower. Her FA-18 Super Hornets, EA-18G Growlers, MH-60S Seahawks and E-2 Hawkeyes have flown over 13,000 sorties in the 7 months of combat around Yemen. Weapons employed total at least 80 air-to-air missiles and 350 ground attack munitions. Eisenhower's deployment marks the most intense and most prolonged naval combat fought by the United States Navy since the Second World War. Unlike any carrier deployment since that time, Eisenhower and her strike group have been within range of the enemy for almost the entire deployment. Considerable precautions have been taken, including constantly changing the carrier's position, and her F/A-18s fly constant combat air patrol over the carrier. More crew stand on alert to respond to evolving threats. Her MH-60 Seahawks also help secure the carrier from surface threats such as USVs. The warships of her strike group will also depart with her, bringing USS Philippine Sea, USS Gravely and USS Mason back to Norfolk in Virginia. Also departing the Red Sea is one of the UK's contributions, HMS Diamond. In her 10-month voyage, she completed Exercise Firedrake in the High North off Norway, before sailing back to Portsmouth, then to Gibraltar, then to the Red Sea in November. The Type 45 destroyer successfully engaged 9 kamikaze drones and an anti-ship ballistic missile. Houthi media outlets claimed twice that she had been sunk. Despite Iran's claims of Houthis' autonomy and denial of involvement, the commanding officer of HMS Diamond and the captain of HMS Richmond both received the dubious distinction of being sanctioned by the Iranian government for systematic violation of human rights, warmongering, and the use of heavy weaponry, amongst a host of other charges. On the 12th of July, the USS Theodore Roosevelt and her strike group arrived off Yemen to replace Dwight D. Eisenhower. Theodore Roosevelt was previously deployed in the Pacific, exercising with Japanese and South Korean forces in the South China Sea. Destroyers USS Daniel Inouye, USS John S. McCain, and USS Halsey complete Carrier Strike Group 9. Despite being embroiled in combat with the coalition, the Houthis are determined to continue attacking Israel. A lone kamikaze drone evades Israeli air defences and hits Tel Aviv unannounced, killing 1. The attack is celebrated by Houthi leadership. We have entered the 5th stage through the Blessed Operation, in which a new weapon has been used. The Houthis declare that Tel Aviv will be their primary target and announce a general increase in attacks directly against Israel. Israel's retaliation arrives the following night, as Israeli Air Force strike aircraft pound the port of Hodeidah, the economic centre of Houthi-controlled Yemen, killing 14. Israel's battle with Iranian proxy groups continues, culminating in the clandestine killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. Amid the credible threat of another massed Iranian retaliatory strike against Israel, the USS Theodore Roosevelt is deployed north and joined by the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group in the Arabian Sea to deter Iran from escalating the conflict. Through July and August, Houthi attacks appear to slow. This is likely a combination of 3 factors: the Houthis' weapon stockpile depleting through use and destruction by US and British strikes, the drastic drop in major shipping traffic through the Red Sea presenting fewer lucrative targets, and Houthi leadership switching to targeting Israel directly. The Houthis score a notable economic victory, as the blockade forces Israel's Red Sea port of Eilat to file for bankruptcy. The Houthis salvo ballistic missiles and drones at Israel, and the Israeli Air Force retaliates against targets in Yemen. Increasingly, these attacks are coordinated by Iranian proxy groups in Iraq, who launch more kamikaze drones at Israel. The Houthis likely seek to improve their standing in the eyes of Tehran. Iran facilitates negotiations between Russia and the Houthi movement for the transfer of the much more formidable Yakhont supersonic anti-ship cruise missile. An export variant of the formidable P-800 Onyx, it is clear the Houthis still plan to maintain a chokehold over the Red Sea and require the weapons to do it. However, these weapons don't appear to have been delivered. At the time of writing, the last major Houthi attack on shipping occurred on the 21st of August, when the Greek tanker MV Sunion was disabled by 3 kamikaze drones. An explosive-laden unmanned surface vessel is bound for the tanker, but is destroyed by 20mm cannon fire from the French frigate Chevalier Paul, moving to assist. The French air warfare vessel evacuates her crew. 2 days later, before salvage efforts can commence, Houthi militants board the abandoned Sunion and detonate 19 explosive charges. This risks the spill of 150,000 tons of crude oil in her tanks, potentially the fifth worst oil spill in history, and would have crippled Yemen's economically vital coastal areas. This is prevented thanks to a massive multinational salvage effort, and Sunion is towed safely to Suez in October. The Red Sea crisis has exacted a substantial cost in munitions expenditure. By October 2024, US forces alone have expended over $1.85 billion worth of munitions. This total includes both land attack munitions employed against Houthi targets ashore in Yemen, and air defense weapons used to defeat incoming attacks. By the end of 2024, US forces claimed to have intercepted over 400 Houthi drones and missiles over the course of the crisis. US warships contributed to this total by employing 80 of their advanced long-range SM-6 SAMs, 120 of their medium-range SM-2, and a handful of short-range Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles. In addition, the US Navy fired 160 rounds from the 5-inch guns of the Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. The use of extremely expensive missiles, such as the $2.2 million SM-2, against cheap kamikaze drones that only cost a few $1,000s, has drawn criticism throughout the conflict. While Houthi weapons are cheaper, and therefore there is an economic advantage, the cost ratio should be balanced also against the worth of the target. Using a multi-million-dollar missile against a cheap drone seems less wasteful if it prevents the drone from sinking a $160 million merchant ship, and the economic damage to global supply lines that would come with its sinking, not to mention saving the lives of its crew. Nevertheless, the US armed forces have sought to defeat Houthi attacks in a more efficient manner. Notably, the Navy reports that several Houthi drones have been destroyed through non-kinetic means, likely using electronic warfare systems to isolate the drone from its operator. Other weapons have also been integrated, such as the APKWS laser-guided rocket, used by US Air Force F-16s to cheaply shoot down Houthi drones and missiles. The US Navy's controversial littoral combat ships have thus far stayed out of the action, but the USS Indianapolis is the first to receive an upgrade that allows her to use her Hellfire missiles in a counter-drone role. Indianapolis is the first LCS deployed to the Red Sea. On the 27th of September 2024, she accompanies Arleigh Burke-class destroyers USS Spruance and USS Stockdale as they press north through the narrow Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Over the course of their transit, Houthi forces launched 23 kamikaze drones, ballistic missiles and cruise missiles at the American Surface Action Group. All are defeated by the SM-2s and SM-6 of the destroyers. It is not known if Indianapolis fired in anger, but her electronic and signals intelligence systems provided crucial early warning of impending attacks. She is the first of the US Navy's small but controversial littoral combat ships to go into harm's way. Further north, the low-level conflict between Israel and Hezbollah erupts into an all-out war. Israeli airstrikes cripple the group, once regarded as the most heavily armed non-state actor in the world. As Iran's oldest ally, Hezbollah begs for assistance from its patron. On the 1st of October, after the death of Hezbollah's senior leaders in an Israeli airstrike, Iran's Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps fires a hail of 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. Most are intercepted, but some penetrate the missile shield, causing minor damage. Again, the United States pressures Israel to limit its response. On the night of the 17th of October, the United States conducts another round of bombing against targets in Yemen. To withstand the American air campaign, as they did the Saudis, the Houthis have increasingly moved underground. In a show of force, as much to deter Iran from further escalation as to cripple the Houthis, a pair of B-2 Spirit stealth bombers devastate deep subterranean weapons storage sites with bunker-busting munitions. By November, Houthi attacks against shipping reduce to a trickle as the group redoubles its efforts into drone attacks against Israel. The US-led coalition continues hitting Houthi assets ashore. Notably, a strike around the capital of Sana'a sees the first combat use of the F-35C, the carrier-launched variant of the F-35 Lightning, flown by VMFA 314, the Black Knights, from USS Abraham Lincoln. Despite the change in Houthi targeting, shipping transits through the Red Sea and the adjoining Suez Canal are still low. At the start of the crisis in November of 2023, There were 2,068 transits through the Suez Canal. By October 2024, that number sits at 877. There has been a slight uptake in container ship traffic through the Red Sea in November, but this is mainly smaller shipping companies taking advantage of the absence of shipping giants like Maersk and MFC. The USS Abraham Lincoln departs the Middle East on the 18th of November, and it is nearly a month later on the 15th of December that its replacement, the USS Harry S. Truman and its strike group, arrives in theatre. The details of the following action are still unclear due to the recency of the event, but some unofficial accounts shed light on what happened on the night of the 21st to the 22nd of December 2024. The 21st of December is shaping up to be a regular, busy evening for the newly arrived Harry S. Truman. The carrier air wing is launching a nighttime attack against Houthi command and control facilities. As the striking Super Hornets are dropping their JDAMs, the E-2 Hawkeye watching the airspace detects a number of kamikaze drones, climbing from their launchers towards the Truman battle group. Over several hours, the warships of the strike group and FA-18s flying defensive counter-air shoot down up to 17 kamikaze drones and 2 anti-ship cruise missiles. Satisfied that the Houthi raid has been repelled, the Hawkeye calls picture clean over the radio, and the defending Hornets drift towards the carrier, queuing up to land back aboard. One FA-18F, configured as a refueling aircraft and laden with external fuel tanks, is about to turn onto its final approach when the brilliant light of rocket motors pierces the darkness. The pilot, call-sign Fig, and the weapons systems officer, call-sign Blunder, in the back seat, watch with awe as an SM-2 tears skyward from the cruiser USS Gettysburg. The missile pitches over and angles towards them. "Dude, do you want to get out?" Fig asks Blunder. He doesn't hear Blunder's reply, but in an instant the two airmen are flung clear by their ejector seats. The Hornet is incinerated just seconds later. Another FA-18F, trailing several miles behind, sees the fireball and issues a frantic mayday call as another SM-2 roars from Gettysburg's missile silos and arcs towards them. Having set up for landing, the second Super Hornet's countermeasures are disarmed. The pilot rams the throttles forward and throws the fighter into a dive, turning beam on to the missile. With no decoys, trying to force the missile to bleed off precious energy is their only option. They watch as the illuminated smoke trail reaches its apex and plunges towards them. The rocket cuts out as it begins its terminal dive. The Hornet turns hard into the now invisible missile, hoping to force an overshoot. It whips past within 100 feet and hits the water. The missile was aborted at the last moment, the command staff aboard Harry S. Truman calling a ceasefire just in the nick of time. Around 20 minutes later, Fig and Blunder, safely in their life rafts, are picked up by one of Truman's MH-60 Seahawks. It is not known how or why the Ticonderoga-class cruiser USS Gettysburg misidentified and engaged the two FA-18s, and investigations into the incident are still ongoing. Houthi forces also claim to have shot down the aircraft. Despite the stunning friendly fire incident, the Truman carrier strike group is back in action just over a week later on the night of the 30th to the 31st of December. Tomahawks launched by the escorts of the strike group, as well as US Navy and Air Force strike aircraft, maintain the attritional strike campaign, targeting more command centers, weapon production sites, and ammo dumps, as well as a coastal radar. Again, the Houthis launch a wave of kamikaze UAVs and anti-ship missiles, which are all shot down, this time without incident. These attacks are the last of 2024. Coalition airstrikes and Houthi attacks against Israel continue into January 2025, but the diplomatic breakthrough between Hamas and Israel securing the Gaza ceasefire brings a halt to Houthi actions. On the 22nd of July, the 25 sailors of the MV Galaxy Leader, taken prisoner when their ship was hijacked on the 19th of November 2023, are released. Houthi leadership pledges to limit attacks to just ships that are Israeli flagged or wholly owned by Israeli individuals or entities, rather than the previous policy to attack essentially any merchant ship, citing vague ties to either Israel, the US, UK, or other nations. In January and February 2025, some shipping companies tentatively return to the Red Sea, but many of the larger companies still stick to the Cape of Good Hope route. continuing to contribute to global inflation with the disruption of global supply chains. At the time of writing, US forces under the new presidential administration have extended their offensive strike campaign against the Houthis, and if anyone has an invite code to the Signal group, we'd love to read more about it.